before we even begin, let's clear this up. How do you pronounce Moog?
It's originally a Dutch name. This goes back, 1,000 years or so. And in Holland, you would pronounce it Moog.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that.
In Great Britain, in English-speaking countries, people see the double O and they say Moog. Now, I just happen to like the sound of Moog.
All right, Bob, we'll go with what you like. Even though I'm not eating food with a spoon and working on drum loops. Today, we're going to look at the Mother 32 semi-modular synthesizer, and we're going to answer the question, is it a good starting point for getting into modular or Eurorack? In the last few decades, through clever marketing and pricing, Moog has intentionally become the Prada of synthesizers. And while a lot of synth nerds will scoff at this and scoff at the lack of features for the price you're paying in general with Moog synthesizers, Moog fans and people who own Moogs will cling on to it and say it's the best thing ever and it's the best value ever. And it kind of reminds me of the Apple versus PC or iPhone versus Android thing. What they are is a boutique company. And what they do is they bring in people who would normally not be interested in buying a synthesizer at all. And that means that there's more people buying synthesizers, which means more people buying other brands of synthesizers. That means more synthesizers are selling, synthesizers are cheaper, and for me, whether I use Moog or not, I have more synths and I'm paying less for them. So thank you, Moog. You've done an awesome job at that. The Mother 32, on the other hand, is a bit of an exception to this. It's priced competitively with other semi-modulars, and it packs the real sound of a Moog, and it even has a sequencer in it. And so for this reason, I got one the moment it came out, the moment I could get my hands on one. And I'm pretty happy with mine, but let's go take a look at it. All right, so as you can see, I have mine hooked up in my Eurorack. It comes with a wooden case and a power supply and audio outs. If you already have a Eurorack, you may choose to do this for the ease of patchability, unless you don't really want to give up the space. This does take up a whole lot of space. I don't remember exactly how many HP, 70 something I believe, which is a lot of space for anybody who has a limited Eurorack setup. So let's hear it. I'm controlling it through a MIDI controller right now. Let's give it some vibrato. So this is like that classic Moog sound that you know so well. Right? Lower tones. Close that filter up. Yep, there you go. That's a Moog. And that's really why you would buy this, is because you get that Moog sound, which a lot of people think is the oscillator, but I believe it's more the filter, which is a very, very limited filter in terms of what you would expect in a modular filter. But that being said, it just has that singing tone that Moog is so famous for. So as far as waveforms go, turn off our... As far as waveforms go, we have our saw, and then we have a square. The square you can edit the pulse with. You can actually modulate the pulse with the LFO, which has some pretty neat applications. And then you could, the VCO mod amount, that's essentially an attenuator. But if you want this to be more musically inclined, you could do something like that. All right, let's look at the sequencer. So, all right. So even without effects, you can hear this kind of sounds great. But what really makes any Moog sound incredible is when you put it through reverb. And so I have my Empress right down here, and that's where it's going to go. And then it just sounds absolutely gorgeous through reverb. And for some reason, Moog is the one synthesizer that's able to pull it off the best with reverb, in my opinion. This is a really nice Boards of Canada vibe. So back to the bread and butter here. One problem I've had with this guy is mom. One problem I've had with mom is pitch tracking. And I was one of the first, I don't want to say that everybody's going to have this, because I was one of the first people to get a Mother 32. I mean, I don't know if that's the first out of like 10,000 people to get it, or if I was like one of the first. But I basically was very aggressive about having this in my studio the moment that it was announced, and I had it, on day one. Day one editions sometimes don't turn out as good as day, whatever else editions. So I've had some pitch tracking issues. And in the beginning, I've emailed Moog about it, and they didn't respond, and I was kind of teed off about it. I get it, though. They make their stuff by hand, or they assemble it by hand, and they were probably really overloaded that week. So, I've tried calibrating it and all that stuff, but I'll show you what I mean. So, here's our oscillator array. So see, on your own, you can't really tell. When you're just listening to this, you can't really tell what's happening. But what I'm going to do is what I'm going to do is get this. I'm going to throw a sine in here from another synth. Same. We're already out of tune. 2 octaves up, 3 octaves up. We're pretty far. 4 octaves up. We're very far gone. That is a bummer. Now, the takeaway from this is not don't buy this unit. The takeaway from this is maybe buy this unit new, and make sure you're not buying a day one, because some people haven't had this addressed. And I'm definitely not the only person. If you go to Muff Wiggler or other modular forums, this seems to be a pretty common problem that a lot of people have had, even after extensive time spent trying to calibrate it. Some other things you can do. So you have noise, by the way. So I guess if we're getting into modular, there is no FM. What we can do for some ghetto FM is let's get that LFO in there. That's still pretty ghetto though. Another thing we could do, we could take this, throw that into the cutoff. That'll raise the cutoff with the note that is pressed in the sequencer. And then the VCF mod amount will pretty much work as an attenuator to where you could adjust the level of that effect. Has a high-pass filter. Doesn't really act like a high-pass filter, though. I'm not a big fan of high-pass filters, so it doesn't really matter. You could invert the polarity, as fun as that may seem to do. So this is the Mother 32. I paid $600 for it. I think that it's an excellent introduction to modular. I think that it, with ins and outs, it kind of teaches you how a synthesizer works, which is what, a good introduction to modular will do. And I don't think that it strays too far out into outer space or left field. It kind of keeps you on the musical side of things, but you can get a little experimental, which I may do in a bit here. So there you have it. I think it sounds absolutely beautiful, and you may or may not agree. So in conclusion, it's my opinion that if you are a musician that is into melody and getting into synthesizers, and you don't have any Eurorack or modular stuff yet, the Mother 32 is probably perfect for you, especially if you like the sounds that you've heard. It does a little bit, and it does that little bit extraordinarily well. If you want to go deeper, and if you're into percussive stuff, generative stuff, if you're into noise even, you're probably going to be a little bit underwhelmed, and something like the O-Coast or the Pittsburgh Modular SV1 they're going to be a better suit for you for the amount of money that you're spending, and they're priced very similarly. Those do not have a sequencer, but things like the BeatStep Pro are it's a great sequencer that's miles beyond what the Mother 32 can do. And I'll hopefully be doing a review on that later. And as you may already know, this Benn Gear channel is an entirely new venture for me. So if there's any hardware or software that you would like me to review, give a tutorial on, or just hear sounds from, let me know in the comments. And be sure to do the normal like and subscribe thing, because the bigger this channel grows, the more stuff I can do with it, and the better it becomes, and then the more you enjoy it. So let's work together. You could share it too, I suppose. Here's some patches from the Mother 32. Enjoy. Here I have the assignable out, producing a random source that is then going into the attenuator. What I'm using is an attenuator, which is the VC mix, and that is going into the cutoff. So essentially we have random cutoff. And I can turn that randomness down here. So this is about as generative as we can get with the Mother 32, at least for me. I'm coming out of the assignable random out, which is essentially a sample and hold per gate, or per clock tick. But it doesn't work. If I put a hold here, it doesn't actually hold that random and hold. But that's something you would expect out of a bigger modular unit. Here I have that random going to cutoff, and I have it also going to tempo, like if I remove this. But no way, it's random. Every single time it's choosing a wildly different speed. And then I also have the LFO controlling the balance between noise and the oscillator. So if we get rid of that, that's the oscillator, that's the noise. Funky. Lead hacker time. I'm going to run the square LFO into the external audio, and it's tuned to the sequence. So it sounds like we have two oscillators, which technically we do, but one of them is not voltage controlled the way that it, a normal oscillator would be. Lastly, this one's a little special because I'm actually controlling, through controlling the cutoff, I'm controlling the melody of the resonance of the filter. And so I'll just sort of go through a progression with this and show you what I'm talking about. And so I'm using the VC mix as an attenuator. See, so that's just the normal resonance without tone control. And if we only use the resonance, we actually get a sine wave, which this doesn't feature. So, hidden sine wave hack. And again, I'm just controlling through the thing that says KB here. That's actually the voltage of the sequencer. And that's actually controlling the cutoff right here. And then that controls the resonance. And it actually works out just like an oscillator.